The First Amendment, the freedom of speech, in the United States Constitution is arguably the most important amendment and you could say part of America in general. And while many people have disingenuously been crying things like cancel culture and that their freedom of speech was under attack because they couldn't be as bigoted and hateful as they wanted to in a public setting, or rather, they could, they just would receive pushback to that from the masses. For the first time in a very long time at least, the freedom of speech is actually under attack in a big way. Hey everyone, my name's Christian Verstappen, and I have a lot to say about many things. I want to talk about, well, a lot of different things. So, there has been, over the past couple days at the time of recording this, on the 18th, well, the 19th, at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, TikTok went dark. But not dark as in, like, you click on the app and it didn't work anymore, you go to the website, it didn't work anymore, not just that, no. There was a message stating that basically, due to certain United States laws, protecting things like cybersecurity and things of that nature, TikTok is shutting down in compliance with that, and that they hoped Donald Trump could save them, essentially. Only 12 hours later, the app went back up, with another message stating that, thanks to Donald Trump, basically, TikTok is saved. Now, this, I feel, in and of itself, should absolutely, raise some red flags. Why would a social media company like this, specifically call out the incoming president like this? Now he is president. We're, recording this, and this will go up after inauguration, and we'll get to that in a little bit here. But why would a social media company do this? Well, I think it's because, like many organizations, like we're seeing with Meta, Facebook, Instagram, all that's connected to Meta. It's already happened with Twitter, now X, all that stuff. These companies are bending the knee. To what? To the incoming and now current administration. Throughout the 2010s, Bezos, Musk to an extent, and who's the guy? Zuckerberg, would do, things like virtue signaling and stuff, and would kind of have this image, if you will, that Silicon Valley and Meta and Twitter and all these different things were more progressive. Now, of course, Musk didn't own Twitter at the time, so that part might have been more true, but regardless, all of these, people running the show, as it were, who owned these social media companies, were in some way or another, seen as more progressive, if you will. But what we've seen now, Zuckerberg made this whole announcement, both on like Facebook in general, as well as going on the Joe Rogan podcast, who's also completely bought and paid for by the administration. All of these companies and big millionaires, and more specifically billionaires, just consolidating and holding on to control of everything. Why did TikTok go down, and why was it only for 12 hours? Well, I believe ultimately it was because they wanted to kind of change some things in the algorithm and such in the background. See, the real reason that TikTok came under attack, not just by the Republicans, but also the Democrats, because one thing that needs to be understood with this is, yes, it was the Biden administration that ultimately put forth the ban, and it did go out under the Biden administration. But it was Trump that originally wanted to get rid of it. The only reason he decided to keep it was because it helped him in election results, which makes sense, but it's also very scummy. Now, it is true that, yes, it was the Biden administration that was trying to get rid of TikTok, and we might have them to thank for it being gone ultimately. But the reason that TikTok was actually under attack was not because of any security reasons or anything like that. I mean, the American government and such harvests our data way more than China, and who cares really if China has, I don't know. But it wasn't about that. There were also people in Congress and such who were discussing the bill that had mentioned things about how essentially there's too much of a pro-Palestinian left-wing, movement, if you will, on TikTok. Now, don't get me wrong. TikTok had its fair share, still does have its fair share of, far-right conspiracies, Nazi ideology being pushed, all this crazy shit, right? Same as YouTube and Twitter and all those different things. But something about the people on TikTok and the way the algorithm worked was just more balanced. Yes, you saw the crazy right-wing shit, but you also saw the more sensible, left-wing and even some center-right, center-left stuff as well. But we've reached a point where these companies are basically being told, play ball or you're out of here. And with that said, we then, just yesterday, at the time of recording, had Trump's inauguration. And no talk of lowering food prices, lowering rent. But he did make sure to do all the virtue signaling possible. The stupidest one being naming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. What? What even? Who does that even benefit? Who cares, right? But they also made sure to address and say that there are only two genders and two sexes. Now, of course, they did the whole conflating sex and gender as you would expect from this kind of thing. And they said that people will only be officially referred to as male, female, so on and so forth. Now, the honest truth is that trans people, intersex people, non-binary people of any sort have always existed, and they're not going anywhere. But the goal, I believe, with this administration, some of the executive orders that Trump signed and the things that he said during his inauguration speech and things of that nature, is to instill fear. Again, no talk of grocery prices or housing prices or anything like that, but the plan to get rid of millions of illegal immigrants. Oh, the denaturalization thing. Apparently what it's meant to be, because I thought originally it was meant to be if you are born in this country, you are no longer immediately considered a citizen, and that applied to people who were already born. Apparently it only applies to people who will be born after, I think, February 1st is when it goes into effect. Now, he's taking credit publicly, and TikTok is giving him credit for having saved TikTok. But he's even said it's not really that he saved it, it's more so that he gave a 75-day extension, and he doesn't know if it's going to fully be saved or what's going to happen with that. We don't know. So he is not the, savior of TikTok. He hasn't mentioned anything about egg prices or housing prices or anything of that nature. Which, much like with the Biden administration, how we needed to hold them to account, we gotta obviously hold Trump and his administration to account. Why is housing still the way it is? Why are my eggs still $2, $4, whatever? Why have they gone up? Because the reality is, you notice prices for things only ever go up, they never go down. You really think Trump's going to change that? So all of this said and done, of course, he pulled signed executive orders to pull out of World Health Organization, which is insane. That's like how we as a bunch of first world countries essentially are on board and are able to protect against or prevent things like, the crazy pandemic we had a couple years ago. What's really wild to me is how much people lose perspective of just a few years ago, sometimes even just a few months ago. But I mean, hey, what better example is there of that than how he pardoned essentially, not literally all, but a large majority of the people who protested on January 6th. Now, there was another highlight at the inauguration that many people caught. And while there are some trying to tell you this is not what you saw, you can definitely trust your eyes with this one. Elon Musk, free speech absolutist. Can't even make this up. Sieg Heil just did a Nazi salute at Trump's inauguration. Why? Because those are his people. And he said something about how his heart goes out to them. And instead of going like this with his hand, my heart goes out to you, he Sieg Heil'd. Now, you can look at that and say, oh, okay, well, that wasn't him Sieg Heiling, he was just doing my heart goes out to you, and he just put his arm in a weird way. Really? Is that why he turned around and did the same thing to the crowd behind him? Is that why the people in the audience, some of them, did it back? Or is that why there are people who are themselves self-proclaimed Nazis were totally on board with him doing this for being so based, right? Is that why? Because it was an accident? Because, we're being ableist if we mention this because he has autism or he has social, like he's not self-aware or whatever. Okay. That's no excuse. Still did a Nazi salute. Where are all the other, mentally, I can't think of the right word, I'm just going to say mentally different people who just do Nazi salutes? You can say, what about like people with Tourette's? Okay, sure. Yeah, they'll spout out, crazy words and stuff now and then. But they don't do shit like this. Whether intentionally doing a Nazi salute or just doing it because it's what felt natural to him, he's very aware of Nazi salutes and was signaling in one way or another, either intentionally or otherwise, to his base of support. Nazis. Now, considering he supports the AfD in Germany as well, that's pretty much as close to actual German Nazis as you can get. And there will be many people, liberals, people on the right, whatever it may be, who will look at that, who will hear me saying that, who will hear you saying these kind of things, pointing these out to people, and they'll say, well, you call everyone a Nazi, or how can you say these people are as bad as Hitler, or whatever it is, right? And the reality is, I guarantee you, back in World War II, there were people saying the same kind of thing. Oh, Hitler's not really that bad. Oh, he just wants to, what he's doing, he's really making, Germany better, all these different things, right? And you don't have to take my word for it. The Nazis used to be a popular party in the United States to the point where they had a conference at that place all the like big artists go, Madison Square Garden. Now, does that mean every artist who's performed there since or before whatever is a Nazi? Of course not. But what that does show is it was big enough, Nazism in the United States of America was big enough that they were able to clear out seats at Madison Square Garden. This is a place where, like, Ed Sheeran and Sabrina, I imagine Sabrina Carpenter has performed there. Taylor Swift definitely has. The Beatles. I think Elvis has performed. You know, the boss. I can't remember his. Bruce Springsteen. You know, big artists. Pretty sure U2. All the, like, U2 the band, not U2. I don't know, you might have performed there. But big artists. It's a lot of people to fill up Madison Square Garden. That's how popular the ideology was in America. And what we have seen over the last 10, maybe 15, maybe 20 years is that the reality is that far-right ideology was never beaten. It just went into hiding. And that is what is so important. And I know I'm not the first person to point this out, but that's what's so important about Trump being in office. It gives credence and, oh God, what is the word? I'm sorry, I'm losing track of my words here. Not acceptability. Validity? Okay, we'll say, yeah, validity to these other far-right extremists. And yet, people will defend Elon on this. I'm sure they'll find some way to spin the narrative in a couple of days or so. But they will find a way to make it seem like either he didn't actually do this or, you know, something else. But, you know, they'll find a way to whitewash this, to make it, you know, more palatable for the American people, whatever it may be. It's just really sad. And like all of the big mainstream media organizations are bought and paid for. It's very likely that Trump is going to go after lowering medical prices, like just completely completely get rid of the work that the Biden administration has done in regards to lowering medical prices for people on Medicare. And of course, you know, far worse than that, I really do think that if it gets to a point where we are seeing ICE raids in schools and churches, like they have said may happen, I really do think that that is going to cause a lot of people to wake up. When you start seeing your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers getting taken by immigration customs or whatever, really starts to put things into perspective. But something that's really concerning about that as well is people won't know about it, obviously, if it's not reported on. Which brings us back to the whole thing with free speech. Months ago, literally my birthday, I woke up to adult entertainment websites being restricted with a nice little message from Cherie DeVille, a pre-recorded message about how basically Congress and representatives in America have decided that to, protect children from, the harms of adult entertainment, it was best to make it so everyone had to have an ID, right? Texas dealt with this. We dealt with it for a couple of days, and then it went away for a while. But then it came back at the beginning of this year. What we are seeing with the attack and the outright censorship on adult entertainment, there is a great quote that I like by Mike Stabile, Stabile, I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it, where he said, "Porn is the canary in the coal mine of free speech." And I do very much believe that. And I think that seeing restrictions and roadblocks put in place to that under the guise of protecting the children, because it's always about, oh, think of the children, right? All the pearl clutching and all that shit, right? And yet, if what we saw happen with TikTok is so easy to be taken away and given back, that sets a extremely dangerous precedent for everything. I genuinely would not be surprised if we start seeing crackdowns on any type of, left-wing or content critical of the current administration. This is one of the many reasons why I have started moving into media analysis as well as cultural and social and political commentary. A lot of it was also for my own mental health, but also because I'm not entirely sure that this type of content is going to be sustainable, if it's going to be allowed, or at the very least that it might get some kind of shadow banning or something in the next year or so, couple years, whatever it may be. There are some bright spots to this. First of all, change is inevitable, and whatever comes, we have to be able to deal with it and face it, resist if we need to in whatever way that may be. Which, I want to be clear, I am not advocating and would not ever advocate for any type of violent revolution or violent action or anything like that. On that note, just real quick, whenever people think about revolution, they often think about things like the American Revolution and how we beat the British. I often think of the French Revolution and how horrible that was, both for people in it and how horrible the aftermath of it was with the power vacuum it created, and how the leader of the revolution, Robespierre, just made himself a god and it became a mess. So I'm not in favor of any of that kind of revolution, if you will. But I do believe that systemic change can and needs to be done on a multitude of different levels. Gutting administrations and programs and things of that nature is not the way to go about it. If anything, businesses, for example, of course, need more restrictions. We so often take it for granted, but I always bring this up to people because I was just kind of mind blown when I even learned it myself. Things like the 40-hour work week, paid breaks, paid lunch, well, not paid lunch, but a mandatory lunch break, paid holidays. These are weekends. These are things that we take for granted, that unions and other people fighting for these things, which were not popular at the time, are now we would think it's insane to not have these things. The people back then fought for, and in many cases literally, and died for, rights that we now take for granted every day. Civil rights, women's rights, the list goes on. My point in saying that is, you and I are part of history. And what we do to challenge status quo of today, we are ultimately fighting for the new status quo of tomorrow. And that is a fight worth fighting. The biggest bright spot we have in all this, though, the biggest hope we have is that fascism in general, and especially this administration, will likely be incompetent on many levels. Likely it will flex on different things, but not actually cause the harm the people in it say they want to cause. And make no mistake, it isn't just Trump. It isn't just Republicans. It is everybody that is beholden to capital interest, first and foremost, above everything else. We are in this situation largely, if not entirely, because of the Democrats and their failure to really address what Trump and his cronies were and properly fight against them. So many people treat this like it's a sports game. And it's not. These aren't teams where it's like, oh, may the best man win. No, you're fighting for the good of your country and the good of the world. But I do believe that whether it be 4 years or the wannabe dictator does become an actual dictator and this goes on longer, if the people have hope, we can fight, we can overcome, and things can get better. They can get a lot worse for a lot of people, but they can also get better for everybody. But it's not just going to happen. We have to fight for it. And I think the best way to do that is through advocacy and conversation. Most people, legitimately, if it wasn't out of racism, sexism, any bigotry like that, they voted for Trump because they thought he would really do two main things: lower the price of groceries, lower housing, fix the economy. So, till we see it happen, just got to keep asking, why are my eggs still so damn high? Why is it still so hard to find a place? And why are these renters just destroying us constantly? Well, not the renters, the landlords. Those are the kind of things he promised to help us with those things. He says promises made, promises kept. We'll see. As always, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something you do like. Take care of each other out there, guys. Peace and love.